I'm going to talk about using MRI for catheterization in patients. It's still very early. We've been real plotters in making progress. But one cool thing that I won't mention after this introductory slide is when you're doing catheterization in the magnet, you don't have to wear lead. So if lead is your problem, this might be one element of the solution. So the reason you use MRI for catheterization guidance is that even though our pixel matrix is tiny, 1,000 squared versus 1 or 200 squared, even though our frame rate may be lower or comparable, the pixel density is so high. There's so many colors. You can see soft tissue, not just bone and iodinated contrast, that it's comparably or perhaps more information rich. Now, admittedly, this comes at the expense of spatial resolution, temporal resolution, and some degree of complexity. It may be justified when the information you need is really important. So if you're telling me that a pulmonary vascular resistance, which is a flow-dependent measurement, if that PVR value is important in clinical decision-making, then what the heck are you guys doing with your assumed fix and thermodilution flow measurements? Because I'll argue that you're using random number generator, and you might as well not take the kid to the cath lab. You might as well just roll the dice. Radiation sparing and lengthy procedures, blah, blah, blah. So this MRI fluoroscopy, as I call it, could be useful to image guidance. Here's an assessment of flow. The coefficient of variation for thermodilution is very high, and with MRI phase contrast flow and measurements can be low. Here's an example. We've been doing this at the NIH Clinical Center for more than 6 years. This is a standard clinical procedure. It's just not a big deal, and it's every bit as boring under MRI as it is under X-ray. You fill a balloon with air, carbon dioxide, or dilute gadolinium contrast, and you can navigate a balloon wedge end hole catheter anywhere. You guys okay with your lighting?
Sorry.
No, it's my complexion. This is really good. This really highlights my complexion.
Why you look? You forgot the makeup.
Get my friends to stop doing this. Okay. We also have done this in some pediatrics labs. This is the lab at Children's National Medical Center. You can configure it and do the same boring procedure. And if you want to avoid radiation completely, you can do this. And I don't know that that's a sufficient justification for all the pain, unless you're making a measurement of pulmonary vascular resistance, in which case it may be worth it. Maybe we can digress for a moment to the questionnaire that I forgot to start with. Dr. Horlick, are you able to do that?
Absolutely. Do we have any questions, please?
Okay, I like this. So what do you think about the idea of MRI catheterization? A, why would I do that? Life is too short and I just want to get through my list. B, why would I do that? Who cares whether my measurements are accurate? We're going to fix the lesions anyway. Wow, I didn't know you could do that, you silly, wasteful Americans. Or, maybe I should think about getting accurate PVR values. Or, I'm thirsty for some of that red, liquid, nutritive substance that was shown in the first slide.
Yeah.
Okay, God bless you. You have seemingly open minds. But I know you're not being truthful because you're Canadians. You're just being polite.
Most people are from the U.S.
Interesting. And is there a second slide after this one of pre-questions? Okay, that was it? Okay, good, thank you. So let's go back to the top. So in order to do this, there are two approaches. It's kind of like Quicken Basic and Quicken Premier, or TurboTax Basic, TurboTax Deluxe. So Basic, you can't use hand signals. You need to have fancy headsets because the MRI environment is acoustically really hostile. And you have to be able to speak to each other. And these headsets cost a ton of money, more than $50,000 US dollars. A kit to equip your whole lab. But you can all speak on an open mic, and you can have multiple channels. If you use moderate sedation, you can have a parallel channel for someone to talk to your patient. So hemodynamic recording, you can use the stinky radiology monitors that most MRI scanners have today, or you can make some kind of non-commercial front end to connect to your very fancy high-fidelity hemodynamic recording system, MacLab or Census or whatever brand you like. The video displays are pretty inexpensive, and you can suspend them from the room. You could buy a $1,000 video projector, and most of them actually just work out of the box. And You can accomplish this using any cardiac MRI commercial system, although there are dedicated interventional cardiac MRI hosts that make it crazy easy. And some of you say, oh my goodness, I'm so scared. MRI has all these big physics words and ooh, it's scary. But you know what? Ultrasound is more complicated than MRI. And you guys are totally comfortable turning on a machine, sticking a probe on someone's chest, and the amazing sophisticated circuitry you use, extracardiac, intracardiac scanning, you just use it. You turn on a probe, you take a picture, and you look at it. And MRI is that way too now. So put those excuses to bed. Now, we've given a bunch of hands-on courses where people from all over the place come to our lab, and we teach them how to do this, and we give them some hands-on experience. And one team in University College London came to our course a year or two ago, Danny Knight and Vivek Mutarangu, and they have a tertiary pulmonary hypertension clinic in London, and they just decided to implement this. They don't have a fancy lab like I do. They just have a scanner, and they just did it. And look at their procedure times, just their first 50 patients. A patient, this is their department time. Patients can walk in and walk out in 60 minutes having had an MRI heart cath. And they get through a list of 5 patients a day before lunch. I think that's pretty cool, and any one of you could achieve the very same thing. So it doesn't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to be complicated. You can exercise them. Okay, so let me cycle through and get off the podium so we can talk about more interesting things. But I do want to tell you about some significant new advances in cardiac MRI. Then here's a really groovy new advance, which is low-field MRI. You know, when you think about it, I know most of you don't know about MR in general, and you think it's an arms race. I have a 1.5 scanner. No, I have a 3 Tesla scanner. Well, my hospital has a 7 Tesla scanner. And that's great because each Tesla costs about $1 million, and each Tesla makes it harder and harder to take satisfactory pictures. It is just technically very difficult for reasons you probably don't care about. And it is, I want all of us to start waging asymmetrical warfare. If we turn down the base magnetic field, we can get rid of heating. We can make our systems incredibly inexpensive and lightweight and easy to use. So what we did was we ramped down our scanner from 1.5 to 0.55. This is work by Adrian Campbell in my lab. And we have fabulous diagnostic CMR and flow measurements and parametric mapping. This is an index of tissue characteristics, an added benefit of MRI. And we can just do that. Now, these are not yet commercially available, but they're going to be really, really soon. We've done MRI catheterization on our low-field scanner. It's no big deal. It's the same thing. The same images. You can do it with your eyes open. You can do it with your eyes closed, and it remains just as boring. But what's cool here is we're able to use off-the-shelf metallic guide wires. You know how when you put your popcorn and you forget that it's got the metal in the microwave oven and it explodes or heats and it's really bad? Well, that's what happens when you use commercial guide wires at 1.5 T or higher. They heat up. It's just how it's the energy you have to expose the system to in order to achieve images. But at low field, our wires don't heat. That's pretty nice. Now, they can't be magnetically attractive, so a lot of stuff that's cheap stainless steel won't work, but nitinol wires, a glide wire, it just works. And then there's another problem. At high field, the air-tissue interface destroys images, so-called susceptibility artifact. Look at this image of the lung at low field, at high field, and look at the same image of the lung at low field. Admittedly, this is a patient with a classic NIH disease, lymphangiololeiomatosis. But I mean, look at the pathology here, and look at the cost of taking repeated functional imaging. You can have a patient take a deep breath. You can have them exercise. You can look at water redistribute with no cost in terms of radiation exposure. Come on, that's promising, right? Dr. Horlick, I mean, that's cool, right? So God bless Dr. Campbell-Washburn. So the implications are devices don't heat, defibrillators don't heat, pacemakers don't heat, brain implants don't heat, guide wires. It's premature to say this, but I know technically these things can be made unbelievably cheaply. I mean, echo machine cheap. Like clear out your echo bays and replace half of them with low field magnets. I know that you guys in Toronto have a low field company. Unfortunately, their systems are directed at brain, but this concept's going to be really cool. Okay, let me change subject. How are we doing on time? Do I have 2 more minutes or you want me to shut up now? Because I'm sick of talking. Do you want me to shut up?
No.
That's a leading question. Okay, so you know. Okay, so you know that myocardial biopsy is stupid. It's stupid for a lot of reasons. We don't know how to look at our specimens. You might as well throw them in the trash. They'll be just as sensitive for pathology. Just make up the reports and it'll be just as accurate, right? And so, if you have a diffuse disease, that's fine, and that's why we're looking for other markers of, for example, transplant rejection. But if you have a focal disease, I mean, Jesus, that's stupid to use X-ray to guide your bioptome. So if you had pathology you could see under MRI, it'd be nice to do targeted biopsy. And so Toby Rogers in my lab, we made up some disease in animals, and we targeted it, and we got higher yield, blah, blah, blah. This is technically challenging, but we put money out, and within some time, we'll have MRI bioptomes. So if there are focal diseases or masses that you want to actually sample under image guidance, I think that's a plausible case to want to do that in the magnet, and it doesn't have to be such a big deal. I showed you in my first presentation Kanishka Ratnayaka's cave pulmonary shunt, which he's already put into patients, but all the prep work I didn't tell you was done under MRI using, look at these greenish devices. I mean, our devices are serving as antennas and not just mechanically. And so his first cave pulmonary shunt work was done in pigs, using off-the-shelf devices, just using real-time MRI. It's kind of cool that you can see everything, and you don't care that there's air in the way of your ICE probe or your TE probe, because you can see in any arbitrary angle under MRI. And in your crazy, complicated disease where I don't understand what Dr. Bentz is saying, you can see it. You don't have to make it up. You don't have to make a fancy Mullins map on a piece of paper. You can just see the pathology in the anatomy. So I think that's nice. So you can buy a commercial guide wire that's supposedly MRI safe for 1.5 Tesla in the store, but I suggest you not, because this guide wire is a piece of plastic. And I mean, it is literally no different than using a spaghetti noodle, except it happens to be a spaghetti noodle with a pointy sword at the tip. So I don't know that I would want to use that on MRI. That said, we can turn down the input energy at 1.5 Tesla and scan with a Terumo glide wire. It's just that you can't see it almost at all. So we're working hard to make guide wires that have incorporated electronics so you can see them nice and pretty like this. But that's a long-standing project, and I've been a total effing failure on this topic for several years. I hope to fix that. But one thing, I've convinced Cook to make a guide wire that, this is actually really stupid. You would think that the reason that guide wires heat up under MRI is that they're long, and so they happen to resonate and they get hot. If you have short things, they happen not to heat up in the magnet. So why not just staple together some short things that are made of metal, and you can have a metallic guide wire as long as they don't conduct electrically. Am I doing, is that a stop time thing? Okay, so we will soon have these so-called segmented metallic guide wires for MRI use really soon. And finally, my fellow North Americans. There's a whole discipline of cardiology, cardiac electrophysiology, which relies on, for the most part, radiofrequency ablation of lesions, burning away the heart. And that's fine, and these guys are smart, and sometimes they even help people. The problem with RF ablation, the problem is that their fundamental tool is stupid. Because what happens when you heat up an electrode touching muscle? Right? You get a zone. So, just like cooking steak with something hot, you get a zone of dead surrounded by a zone of oedema. And the problem with that zone of oedema is that it's non-conductive. So in the EP lab, great, I'm awesome. I have ablated this rhythm. I've terminated I've eliminated the short circuit. The rhythm's going to be gone. And then 3 weeks later, after the oedema heals, the conduction tract comes back. So there you go. So you understand the problem. So, I think RF is great because it's cheap and versatile, but the way you should ablate heart muscle is with vinegar or vodka. Chemoablation with acetic acid, which is quite caustic when concentrated, or ethanol. And what's great about chemoablation is it's very toxic in high concentrations, but as it gets diluted away from your target, so bystander injury is going to be much less because dilute ethanol, dilute vinegar, it's just salad or cocktails. And it's not going to injure bystander tissue. So I think one of our goals is to work really hard to make these clinically accessible. Interestingly, and we learned this from the interventional radiologist, when we inject ethanol into myocardium, you get these stellate lesions that are really icky. They're not, as opposed to acetic acid, which performs differently as it desiccates tissue. You get these beautiful circumscribed lesions. It's really interesting. So we're targeting on the clinical development of acetic acid for chemoablation, both under MRI and even under X-ray. We made a model, blah, 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 and we made it look pretty by chemoablation. So to summarize, I think MRI chemoablation is cool, and we're working on tools. I hope to get it into your hands to start with LVOT ablation through the myocardial septum. And to summarize this talk, I think clinical MRI catheterization is groovy because you can use it if the flow measurements are important to you. If you're making an important pulmonary vascular resistance measurement, you might want to consider using it. It's been done in over 1,000 children and adults. A whole bunch of sites are spending money now to make it happen. The technology may enable cool therapeutic procedures, but sadly I've been disappointingly slow in making progress. But while I think this stuff is groovy, it's up to you to decide whether you want to drink this red, liquid, nutritive-like substance. Does anybody know what this is?
Kool-Aid.
Yeah, it's up to you to decide whether you want to drink the Kool-Aid. So thanks for listening.
You can actually see the smile.
Well, I stole that from the web. Okay, that's it. Thank you.